Preparing? All right, we are live now. So good morning,
Good
Professor
morning.
Krishna.
Good morning.
Welcome once again. It's an honor to have you here with me once more. And hello all, my name is Georgiades. Today is the second part of my interview with Professor Krishna. Professor Krishna is a lifetime member of the Theosophical Society. He is a trustee of the Krishnamurti Foundation India, staying at the Ragat Education Center in Varanasi, India. He was director of the center and principal of the Ragat Peasant School from 1986 to 2002. As a trustee of the foundation, he continues to be involved with its activities. He has written articles and books on various issues relating to the teachings of J. Krishnamurti. He has also delivered lectures on education, science, and society to varied audiences. He is an honorary scientist and fellow of the Indian National Science Academy, New Delhi, as well as the Indian Academy of Sciences, Bangalore. Before joining the Krishnamurti Foundation India, he was professor of physics at the Department of Physics, Banaras Hindu University, where he had been a faculty member for 24 years. He specialized in solid-state physics, his area of research and teaching being X-ray crystallography. Thank you, Professor Krishna, for being here once more.
Welcome.
And I would like to begin asking you the question about, sorry, there was an echo. So there is a very serious ecological crisis in the world today. Around 60% of animals have been wiped out from the face of the earth since the 1970s. It's really a very, very sad situation. There are many animals that will be extinct, will disappear completely from the face of the earth in the next 20 years. Elephants are in the list, giraffes, and many, many more animals. Tigers in India, as you know, there are very few. So this is a very, very sad situation and a very sad perspective in terms of future for humanity and the world. What would you have to say about it?
There are superficial causes for what is happening right now immediately, but there are more deep-rooted causes for man's relationship with nature. And these change in man's relationship with nature occurred long ago with the advent of science. Man started feeling that he is all-powerful and that nature can be used as a resource for material development. Almost all our ecological problems are a result of this change in attitude towards nature. You see, nature has existed for billions of years. And in nature, there is a very delicate balance that has evolved over millennia. It includes mountains, rivers, the air, the grass, the birds, the bees, the animals, and human beings were part of all that. We also lived in harmony with nature. We were also part of nature. Science itself tells us that biological evolution is part of nature, and we human beings have resulted through biological evolution. But somewhere along the line, I think in the 15th or 16th century, the feeling grew that the universe and everything around it is all governed by natural laws which science has determined. And the only purpose of existence is to benefit man. And so the whole attitude towards nature turned into one of exploitation. Earlier, human beings used to worship nature. They worshipped a tree, they worshipped a cow or animal. And there was a kinship between human beings and other species. No doubt, a certain amount of killing is part of nature, but that takes place only because of the natural food chain, that there is a certain animal who eats another animal. But man developed a whole industry, more or less. I mean, we object to the Holocaust, but every day we are conducting a Holocaust using animals, butchering them for our food, because a view developed that animals don't have souls, that they don't feel pain. I have held dialogues in Europe in which people have stood up and said animals don't feel pain. I said, can't you see? And this belief of yours that animals don't feel pain is not apparent. The animals have a nervous system almost as developed as our own nervous system. And you can see that, them suffering and feeling the pain. What justifies us from killing them? They are our ancestors. We resulted from out of them. But somehow this attitude changed, and because we have divided the world into countries which own a certain amount of land and they have a rivalry against each other, there was a competition between nations who can exploit nature faster to develop its own economic resources. So nature, instead of being a friend, became a resource for the fulfillment of our own desires and greed. That is the deeper psychological causation which has created all these problems. The more apparent ones now are the use of coal and fossil fuels and the production of carbon dioxide and the destruction of the ozone layer and things like that, about which we are reading every day in the newspapers and so on. But all this are the immediate reasons. The deep-seated reason is this change in the attitude or in the relationship between human beings and nature. Unless we acknowledge that there is this delicate balance and we need to work with nature, not spoil that balance, not have the arrogance to think that we can do anything we like and exploit nature for our own ends. You have to respect nature. You have to respect, like you respect your friends, you have to respect nature. And I don't say you don't have progress, but your progress must be within the parameters of that balance of nature. If you violate that balance of nature, that's what the ecologists and the people who gave the theory, Gaia theory and so on are saying. But the religious people in the ancient religions said that much earlier. The Hindus said that in Vasudeva Kutumbakam. That means the whole of the earth and its surroundings are one family. And now the scientists are also realizing that you either have the whole of it or you will have none of it. You can't decide and choose and say, I will not have forests, I will make paper out of this, or I'll burn the wood, and everything else can continue the same way, because it's a whole delicate balance which is disturbed, whatever you do like that on a mass scale. So that's why I said that there are immediate causes and there are deeper psychological causes behind this phenomenon. And unless we change, we address both the superficial cause as well as the psychological causation, which is more difficult to address because it's entrenched in competition, in materialism, in nationalism, and so on. So you find that even a country like America, after the Trump became a president, has abrogated the agreement regarding climate concerns. It's a global phenomenon. The whole environment, the air, the sky, this, everything we share in common with the rest of humanity and the rest of nature. Not only mankind, but also animals and trees and birds and rivers and so on. So right now there is a lot of ignorance about this, even though scientists are pointing out that we are in the path of self-destruction in a very major way. And it has now come right up to our neck. We may not survive this century if we, and it may already, many people think it's already too late to effect changes. So it's a very deep-rooted and serious problem, and it has arisen out of our own ignorance. The Buddha said long ago, ignorance is the cause of sorrow. We became proud of our knowledge, whatever knowledge we got, especially with science. And that arrogance has created all this, and that is part of the ignorance that we have. Whenever you expand your knowledge, there is also beyond that knowledge, there is the unknown, which is much vaster, and which is the ignorance that we have. And that is what all this phenomenon is telling us, that we thought we know, and we didn't know that we don't know. There's a lot more that we don't know than what we know. So we are discovering the folly. The question now is whether we have time to undo this, and whether we can change our habitual patterns of life. And it has become a deep-seated conditioning in the human mind. And unless that alters, whether we can just solve this problem by dealing superficially with changes, I doubt it very much. And so do all scientists who are also deep thinkers and philosophers. They also think so. I refer to a book called Our Final Century, written by Martin Rees, who was the president of the Royal Society of London. He gives all scientific logic and reasons why it's very unlikely that human beings will survive this century. And perhaps we don't deserve to, because it can be seen that we have been the most destructive species, most cruel species on Earth. So actually speaking, just that we out of our ego, feel superior to the animals and so on. They have not brought the world to the verge of the extinction. It is we, it is our doing. And we are so proud of our doing and our achievements. I think that what you need is a little humility, that we have been mistaken.
Yes, yes. Professor Krishna, you point out something that I consider very important is that we have lost this sense of sacredness that existed in ancient times. This sense of sacredness towards nature and towards everything around us. And this has to do perhaps with science, as you said, with the way that science is moving forward. And this tendency that there is also in academia to reject knowledge linked to religious traditions and those esotericism and all that. And everything becomes very rationalist, and this sense of sacredness is no longer cultivated. How do you think we could establish this connection again?
There are deep-rooted causes there also. You see, we have neglected the whole area of self-knowledge. Both Socrates in the West and the Buddha in the East very clearly pointed out that without self-knowledge, you don't have wisdom. And without wisdom, it'll all go wrong, because knowledge generates power. And power without wisdom turns destructive, turns inimical. So you may discover a truth like E is equal to mc squared, that mass is also a form of energy, and that it can be converted, they can be interconverted. That may be a great truth about nature, which science discovered. But then you combine that with the hostility that nations have towards each other and their desire to attack the other country. And it leads to creating nuclear weapons, destructive weapons. So knowledge by itself is not a panacea. Knowledge is a source of power. It brings money. Money is also a source of power. And power without wisdom is misused. Power is used with self-interest to promote one's own self-interest. And one of the greatest illusions of mankind is to think that self-interest is in our self-interest. Actually, when you examine deeply, you will see that if you act out of self-interest, you destroy not only yourself, but you destroy the whole of the world and humanity also. But the illusion persists. You act out of self-interest. Everybody is acting out of self-interest. And so nations which are built up of people also act out of self-interest. And they see self-interest in a narrow way, thinking that if they win the war, they benefit from it. You don't benefit from war. I mean, we have psychologically remained primitive. The primitive man was divided into tribes, and he was fighting with bows and arrows, and he could only do that much destruction because he didn't have much power. Now those tribes have become countries, national groups, religious groups, and so on. And the bows and arrows have become nuclear weapons and laser-guided missiles and things like that. But the basic tendency to divide and hate other human beings and create war is a psychological problem. And that problem has not gone. And so the more power you generate, that means the more knowledge you generate, you feed this war machine, and also, therefore, the insecurity throughout the world. So it's our own trap, our own undoing, to think that through knowledge you ascend, man ascends. No, through knowledge you generate power. And through power you don't ascend. Through self-knowledge, through wisdom you ascend. And that's why Theosophical Society was created, saying Theosophy is the wisdom religion, that it will cultivate wisdom. And so the essential essence of Theosophy was this quest for truth, which leads to wisdom, because when you discern what is true and what is false, the false ends and the ignorance ends. And that's what wisdom is. Otherwise, you are not living in the real world. You are living in a world of your own thinking, which is not a real world. It is full of illusions. Illusions being all kinds of beliefs which you have, which are not true. And you are not aware that they are not true. That's ignorance. So those are those deep-rooted causes behind all this phenomenon. And I doubt whether this can be solved through more expansion of knowledge. But even today, our effort is all in that direction. All the money is used to do research. To do what? To make still faster computers, to make still efficient aeroplanes, to enhance communication and skills and things like that. So is that our real problem? Is that, do you need still better cell phones and so on? Is that such an important problem? Why is all the time and energy being spent to do research to further this? So we are not recognizing what our real problems are. Our real problems are these ecological crises, the crisis of groupism and war and nationalism. And we are not solving those problems. We are interested in solving some problem in a computer. So I think the ignorance runs very deep, and that is the reason why it's very difficult to change it now. I mean, it has almost become a very long tradition, the scientific tradition and the scientific mind. And there are deeper causes, which I'll talk about on 15th of November, when I talk about the religious and the scientific view about consciousness.
Yes, in terms of immediate changes and deeper ones, right? In terms of immediate change, the change in our way of life, in terms of what we choose to eat, for example, veganism, I think it's a very important way of life in terms of diet that tries to help to end this Holocaust with the animals. What do you think about it? It's also, I would like to emphasize that, as you know, Anna Kingsford, she was here in Europe, an early member of the Theosophical Society in the 19th century, and she was the first person promoting vegetarianism in Europe. She was a theosophist. After that, we have Annie Besant also, who promoted vegetarianism, and of course, with the aim always to protect the animals. Now we have veganism, which is a step forward. Do you think that by changing our alimentation, it's a step towards the process of helping to reduce suffering to the animals? But this is an immediate solution, I would say. And what about the psychological change that needs to help for the suffering to stop?
Well, see, if these changes are coming out of a feeling of compassion, then they are very worthwhile. But if they are just coming because you feel that for your own health, this is better, for the economy, this is better, and so on, then it is not really coming out of compassion. And so deeply, you are still violent. You are still decimating the others. And there, it's a question of drawing the line. You see, we object to the Holocaust because Hitler drew the line between Nazis and Jews. But we are also drawing line between human beings and animals, feeling that animals can be destroyed and killed for our consumption. There are other people who have compassion for animals, but they are willing to eat reptiles. They are willing to eat lower forms of life, fish, and so on, or eggs. So it's a question of where you draw the line. But behind it, the psychological or consciousness level is one of compassion. It must come from compassion and not out of self-interest. A lot of vegetarianism and veganism and so on is coming out of self-interest. Then it doesn't have the same value as when it comes out of a feeling of compassion. So I give much greater importance to the state of consciousness from which your decisions are arising. That matters more than the particular decision that you take. It's all right. I mean, for the individual to say, I will not take milk because there is a lot of cruelty towards the cows and animals and so on in production of milk. Yeah, a few people will do that, but that's not going to change the state of the world. The state of the world is this way because man is exploiting. And that is because there is not compassion. There is not a feeling for the suffering of another. Neither human beings, nor animals, nor plants, other forms of species and so on. As you said, all that is sacred because that's not a creation of our thinking. It's a divine creation. Or if you don't want to use the word divine, well, it's a creation of nature, the intelligence of nature, the order of nature, which science studies. All that is sacred. Nature is sacred because it's not a creation of our thought. And therefore, we have no right to destroy it. Unfortunately, to exist, you have to destroy something. That's part of nature. But you don't have to kill millions of people or millions of animals and so on. Even the tiger doesn't do that. It just eats one animal which he needs for his food, but it doesn't decimate the whole species and turn it into a hatred of the species. That's what we are capable of. And that's why I said that man is the greatest pest on earth. This is a scientific fact. It is not an emotional statement. It's a scientifically provable statement that we have been the greatest pests on earth. The amount of suffering, the amount of cruelty and killing that we have done, not only of other species, but even our own species. No other living creature has done. And yet we claim that we are superior because our idea of superiority itself is wrong. It's based on ability. It's based on power. It's based on intelligence, which is cleverness, not the intelligence which is compassion. So at the root of it is this ignorance. Without self-knowledge, it won't go. You can solve some problems by bringing in solar energy and this and that, but you will create other problems because if the attitude continues to be the same, there is no end to these problems.
So a real change will take place when the process of self-knowledge starts occurring, when the person starts living in a way in which involves awareness of its inner self. Is that so?
Well, how does a human being realize that acting out of self-interest is not in our self-interest? So self-interest persists in our decision-making. And if it is there in the individual, it is there in the group. The world is what we are. It's not separate from what we are. The prime minister, the man in the government, the educated scientists, they are all, their conditioning is operating in taking decisions and so on. So the highly educated people whom we admire a lot, they have not resolved this problem. They are the source of the problem. We admire them, but they are not people of wisdom. They are people of power and ability. Power and ability are small things in life. They are not big things in life. Wisdom is the big thing in life. And we worship the Buddha and Socrates and admire them, but we have not listened to them. The ancient religions have pointed all this out. And we pay lip service to them and observe their birthdays and things like that, superficially. But deeply, we have not really examined what they have said and the truth in that. That is what self-knowledge is, to discover the truth which Socrates discovered, which Buddha discovered, which Jesus Christ discovered, and to come upon those truths in our own consciousness. You don't only talk about it, you publish it, you are proud of it, of your ancestry and so on. All that has very little significance.
In practical terms, how this process of self-knowledge how can someone practice it? I mean, how can someone start trying to change their way of life, but deeply based on compassion and all that? So if you have adolescents in front of you expecting, let's say, some sort of guidance, you may say, no, we cannot offer guidance. We are not gurus and all that. But how self-knowledge can be made a practical things, a force in our life?
You see, it's very difficult to change grown-up human beings. They think that they know, and they are too full of their own opinions, and they will argue and debate and use all their knowledge. I mean, their mind functions like the mind of a lawyer, defending the me and the mine, including their own opinions and all that. That's why it results in debates and fights and things like that. So the only hope lies in children. Children are not strongly conditioned into any attitudes and opinions and so on. So education needs to be changed in a big way to include this inquiry which leads to self-knowledge. Must run in parallel with the inquiry that leads to knowledge and whatever knowledge is needed for daily living. But we have worshipped knowledge and we have ignored this self-knowledge in education completely. Nobody even discusses what really love is. You just accept. You think you know what love is, and you talk about he fell in love with her, or they made love to each other, meaning sex, or he loves her so much he can't live even one day without her, and so on. Even highly educated people talk like that. They don't know. Is that what love is? Is that the love that Jesus and Buddha and Krishnamurti and so on talked about? So why should this not be discussed with the children? What really love is? Nobody discussed. I mean, I went through my whole education and did my PhD and all that. We are all the time learning difficult things about the external world, but learning nothing about ourselves. Even what is needed for our health is not really taught to us. Every human being becomes a parent, but you are not taught in education how to look after a child, what is necessary to be a parent. So we have completely neglected in education this human side. Self-knowledge is not just some abstract thing. It's to discover what right living is. And obviously, we human beings don't know what right living is. It's obvious. Our newspapers, our magazines, the way we are living. I mean, right now, America is on the verge of a civil war on the basis of political opinions. Division are created by political opinions and leaders with self-interest trying to promote that division and things like that. That's the actual state of a human being in which we are functioning. So there's tremendous ignorance. And the only way it can go, I don't know whether we have enough time now left, because education is a gradual process. I mean, it takes 20 years for one batch of students to come out of your school. So, but I don't see any other way, because adults are so divided, so ignorant, and ignorant of their ignorance also. They think they know. They don't know, but they don't know that they don't know.
Yes.
You know, I think Annie Besant, I quoted a Persian proverb, which is very meaningful. So I want to remind you, whoever sees this video, of it. She says there are 4 kinds of people. One who does not know and does not know that he does not know. He is a fool. Shun him. I'm not agreeing with the statement. I am just quoting. Then there are those who do not know, but know that they do not know. They are simple. Teach them. Then there are those who know and do not know that they know. They are asleep. Awaken them. And then there are those who know and know that they know. They are wise. Follow them. That's what the saying says. But you mustn't quickly assume that you belong to that last category, because you may be thinking that you belong to that last category, and you may really be in the first category of one who does not know and does not know that he does not know. That's the difficult.
Yes, it reminds me of Socrates, you know, when he said, the only thing I know is that I do not know. However, he knew something. He knew he does not know.
That's right.
So, so the only thing I know is that I do not know.
You will find that people who have, even in the field of knowledge, who have deeply gone into knowledge, have great humility. Einstein, for example, and Newton also, they made statements like, all I know is one pebble on the seashores, all the seashores of the world. Great humility. Because you need to know a lot before you know that. You really don't know.
Yes, yes.
The man who studies MSc with relativity and so on, he's so proud. He thinks that what he knows, he can explain everything that Einstein did and so on. That comes out of arrogance. It comes out of ignorance.
Yes. So as we have been discussing the problem with the animals, the ecological crisis the world is facing, we are facing, and then you have been pointing out the importance of changing the educational system into emphasizing self-knowledge, the importance into recovering that sense of sacredness that we have lost, the importance of changing our way of thinking, of getting rid of our conditioning. And you have emphasized also a lot self-knowledge. So I have a question. What is the nature of the self?
The self in actuality doesn't exist. It doesn't have existence in nature. It comes into being through a psychological process of identification. I identify myself with my family or my religion or my caste or my country. And that's only a small fragment of the whole. And I identify. And then I define myself as, that becomes the extended self, the me and the mind. So you have attachment to your body, your own opinions and so on, your knowledge, and then your possessions, and then your nation and so on, your concepts, your opinions and so on. That whole process creates the ego, which is the attachment to the me and the mind. Now, obviously, the knowledge is different in our heads. I mean, you studied philosophy and I studied science. So the knowledge in our heads is different, but that is just a difference. When does the difference turn into a division? That's a psychological process. Difference is normal in nature. Everything is different. You go to Italy and France and Germany, they are different. People eat different food, they have different music, culture is different, etc. There's a lot in common, but there is also difference. Sometimes we see the difference as a difference. We have not had a war between tall people and short people. So we are not completely incapable of seeing a difference as a difference only and not turning that into a psychological division. But there is this psychological process of identifying, and therefore you create through that the idea of the me and the mind and the other. And then you are divided from the other. And then you are competing and you are willing to exploit, and then you are willing to fight because their self-interest doesn't tally with your self-interest. And what we call cooperation is when we have common self-interest. When your self-interest coincides with mine, we cooperate. It happens in marriage too, the self-interest of both the people. So mutual gratification takes place and it looks like a lovely marriage and so on, until differences develop. And then my self-interest is in a different direction and yours is in a different direction, and love goes out of the window. It never was there. So long as you are acting on the basis of self-interest, it's not love. Love is where the self is not. And the self is not when this identification process of creating the me and the mind, restricting yourself to your thinking to that, is dissolved within that. That is self-knowledge. That is that's wisdom, and that's what theosophy talked about. But it's not a question of agreeing with that. It's a question of freeing oneself of this process of division in your mind, in the individual. If it's there in the individual, it will be there in the government, it will be there in the school, it will be there in your family, everywhere. And that will destroy love.
Yes. So if the self is an illusion, and then there is such importance for the importance of self-knowledge has been emphasized so much, not only by you, but in all religious traditions and most of the philosophical ones in the ancient world also emphasized that. Considering the self as an illusion and considering the importance of self-knowledge, what is there to know if the self is an illusion?
Self-knowledge is not knowledge about the self. Self-knowledge is learning about relationship, what is right relationship, relationship with nature, with ideas, with other people, with animals, with the river, with my work, all relationship. After all, life is relationship. From the day we are born till we die, we are in relationship with the entire environment. And right relationship means no conflict, no division. And we have not learned that. Learning about that and freeing oneself of that causes of division, that is self-knowledge. It is not knowledge about the self. That won't do. Otherwise, professors of philosophy should be all saints and Buddhas. They know everything. But they are ordinary people. They are not free from ego and quarrels and ambition and desire, conflict and so on. They're just like ordinary people. We value them because they have knowledge and skills and so on. Knowledge and skills, as I said, are small things, but we have given tremendous importance to them, which itself is a form of ignorance, and ignorance is illusion. It's not really important, but you think it is very important, that's an illusion.
So the illusion, in essence, is the sense of separateness, separativity that we have from everything around us. Would you put illusion in this way?
Illusion is the cause of the feeling of separation. It's not only, it's a symptom. Separation is a symptom which points to the ignorance. Take the division between the Arab and the Jew in Middle East, because we are all familiar about it. Actually, the truth is that there is no difference between the Arab and the Jew. They have the same body, the same consciousness, the same instincts, the same emotions. They differ in their concepts about God, but each one is repeating what they have been told. They don't know the truth of that. But they have a sense of ownership, that this is my concept, this is my religion, this is what my ancestors have said. This assertion of me and the mind, that is the ignorance, and that creates the division. So it's the illusions that divide us. The facts don't divide us. Facts may be different, but differences don't create division. Two trees are not divided from each other. They are different from each other. But human beings divide themselves, the blacks and the whites. I mean, if you see that the man from Africa is black and the man from Europe is pink or white, then that's a fact. But the moment you generalize from that and say whites are superior to the blacks, you have brought in a whole lot of measurement and evaluation and a concept of superiority and inferiority and looking down on another, and you have created racism and division. So that whole process occurs in the mind, and it has to be understood in order to free the mind of it. That's self-knowledge. So you have to raise these questions. You have to take responsibility for your negative emotions, for getting rid of them, and not depend on some guru will change this for me, or some messiah will come, or I will follow some religion and it will go away like that. Those are all also illusions. It won't go away because you are generating it within your own consciousness and you are not aware of that. That is the ignorance. So you have to, just as we have promoted inquiry in science and in history and archaeology and so on, we have promoted a lot of inquiry and discovered a lot of new things there and so on. In religion, we have not promoted inquiry. I'm sorry. And certainly not in education. We have not even raised these questions. So education itself has been formulated on a lot of ignorance which is there in the grown-ups. It is formulated in the factory model that children are to be treated as raw material, to be fashioned in 10, 15 years, so that at the end of the education, you will have a scientist and an artist and an engineer and a speaker and so on, who will do the work we want done in society. That's a factory model. You don't care whether that human being, that child will be happy, what his relationships will be like, whether he'll be a bored and worried individual or he'll be a creative individual. No, education doesn't care. It just wants to give knowledge with which he can function. It's like a training in skills and in knowledge. That's a very narrow vision of education, but unfortunately, throughout the world, except for some small lip service as moral education and so on, just 1 or 2 lectures here and there, self-knowledge is not at all promoted. The understanding of your own consciousness and your relationships is not promoted, not even discussed. So the conditioning of the adults is basis, but the adults have not created a good world. So it continues like that. So long as you don't inquire. If the Jews tell their children, Arabs are our enemies, and Arabs tell their children, Jews are our enemies, the enmity is there in the grown-ups, the parents, and it is transmitted to the children. So how will it ever end unless you promote some inquiry that the child should not just blindly obey what his parents are saying, but should ask what is this enmity due to and why they are enemies and why we are fighting. Unless you raise those questions, there is no self-knowledge and no change possible. So it just goes on. In India, somebody started casteism maybe 3,000 years ago, and it still goes on because the child grows up in society and it is there operating in society. He gets infected with it, and there is casteism and their division because of caste and so on. So it's very pernicious, not easy to do away with it in education, but the problem, the adult is the problem, not the child. The child is very innocent. He can be educated, but the adults, their mind is caught in all kinds of propaganda.
And so, Professor Krishna, when talking about self-knowledge being the only way to effective change, which will also help the world, not basically it will help the world, not only ourselves, because you define self-knowledge as right living. This is very important. And you emphasize that self-knowledge is not an isolated process. It occurs through our relationship with everything around us. Yes. That's very, very important because it emphasizes unity and this interconnection that we have with everything, with a stone, with a flower, with the sky, with the humans around us. This is very important. So for those watching this video, in practical terms, if they would ask you, how can we start trying to live in terms of right living? What can we do for that, to achieve that? What would you tell them?
See, there are two approaches. Either you condition people into noble thoughts, which has been tried, All religions have tried that. And you think Theosophical Society, for example, has preached universal brotherhood of man. But do you think that by preaching, by all agreeing, and by believing that it is true, it has become a reality even in the Theosophical Society? It's not. Theosophical Society has had its own divisions. There is not one Theosophical Society. There are half a dozen Theosophical societies around different individuals. So the division process doesn't go away because you have some noble ideas which you are propagating. It's a much more pernicious thing. And that's why self-knowledge is necessary, not simply knowledge of noble thoughts. Which doesn't mean you should not have noble thoughts, but that it is not sufficient. It is necessary, but not sufficient. You cannot create goodness out of just habit formation. It's good to have good habits, but it's not sufficient to have good habits. For example, vegetarianism is a good habit, but you can be a vegetarian and you may be extremely cruel human being. So vegetarianism will not bring compassion into your consciousness. But if there is compassion in the consciousness, vegetarianism will automatically follow from that compassion. That's why I say when veganism and vegetarianism are coming out of a source of compassion, then they have a significance. But when they are just habits, they have very limited significance of one individual. So I'm afraid we have gone so far in conditioning the whole world into a wrong way of relating that it's not going to be easy to reverse this. And not everybody will agree when you want to change the education. The adults, after all, come as teachers, and they will disagree with each other on everything. So there are people who believe in competition, and you will say competition is rivalry, don't encourage that. And there is division of difference of opinion. That's why I said adults are the greater difficulty, not the children.
Yes, but we have to try.
One has to try that. One has to try that.
Sorry, but even though it's difficult,
we have to try on both levels. I mean, you have to solve the immediate problem also, but your immediate problem will keep on occurring if you don't solve the level of self-knowledge and so on. So the war will keep on happening. The United Nations can come and make an agreement and peace, but another war will develop. I mean, you can see that. The Kashmir problem has not ended. The Middle East problem has not ended. So many agreements have been made, but they break for the same reason, that because the psychological problem has not been solved. So to acknowledge that we don't really know what right living is. Our state of our society is showing us that. It's the truth. And so I want to learn. That's the first thing. If I say I don't know, then I can start learning about it. So you can, like in an ashram, you can create a community where we are all interested in discovering what right living is, and a small school in which the children are there and the teachers are there who are all wanting to learn about relationship. Then if violence takes place or debate or fighting takes place, it's an opportunity to learn about it, that from where did this arise in us and so on. So you don't treat it as a nuisance and do away with it or suppress it with punishment and so on. You use it as an opportunity for learning. If you get angry, it's an opportunity to learn from where does this anger arise in me. You will have to learn about anger in order to get rid of it. So that's self-knowledge. And that inquiry we have not introduced into human consciousness. I mean, some Buddhists are introduced, and Krishnamurti tried to introduce it, But, if it just remains at the level of the intellect, it becomes another philosophic property in the mind. It does not really go to the heart. Ultimately, you have to come to the qualities of the heart. Unless there is love, there is compassion, there is non-violence, you are not leading a religious life. You may be talking about religion and saying all kinds of things, but so are all the philosophy professors talking about nice things, but they are ordinary human beings.
I think that we have, thank you so much. I think we have close to 1 hour now of conversation, which we can go for hours and hours, and we do not we do not understand time. It's in moments like this that we understand time is an illusion,
Well, whether you understand or don't, the earth still goes around the sun.
Yes.
It won't stop rotating. Yeah.
So I think that compassion is the key, as you emphasized so much in your answers. And then to close our session, our discussion today, with the last question and the message that you may give to those who will watch this video. How can we become more compassionate human beings? What can be done to achieve that?
Instead of giving a prescription, I would like to raise a question.
Yes.
So that perhaps those who want to seriously dwell on that question may find deeper answers for themselves. My question is the following. When a man is physically blind, we feel great compassion, great sympathy for him, and we help him. We bring food to him, we show him the way on the road, we bring him a chair, and we try to help him. When a man is mentally blind, why do we hate him? What happens to our compassion? Why does it disappear? That's my question.
Thank you so much.
This question and watch, you will come to understand what compassion is.
Thank you so much, Professor Krishna. It has been a wonderful morning with you. How is the situation with COVID in India?
They are saying that the numbers are decreasing now, the number of infected people and so on. There's also some amount of research showing that because a lot of people live in great poverty and therefore live unhygienically and in filthy circumstances, their bodies have developed a lot of immunity, and that immunity is helping them even against COVID also. I'm not sure whether these findings are completely established or they are still to be investigated, but those are the views I read about in the news. But the numbers are somehow going down and it has not turned out to be as devastating for India as it was prophesied. Seeing that we are so crowded and living in such conditions, it should have been like an epidemic, absolutely. But not that many cases have happened, not so many deaths have happened as were foreseen. So there is some hope.
All right, Professor Krishna, thank you so much. I'm glad that you are well and the number of cases in India is decreasing. So I will see you next Sunday in your lecture at the European School of Philosophy.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. I wish you a beautiful